from the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Welcome to this special episode of Pediatrics on Call, the podcast on children's health from the AAP. I'm Dr. David Hill.
And I'm Dr. Joanna Parga-Belinkie. This podcast is for everyone in the medical community, keeping our children healthy and safe.
It's a show by pediatricians for pediatricians.
But anyone who cares about kids will get a lot out of it as well. Today we're taking some time to reflect on the rich history of the flagship journal of the AAP.
While the podcast is only 3.5 years old, so is nearing preschool age, the journal Pediatrics, where we get most of our content, is now 75.
It feels weird to throw a birthday party for a medical journal. So should we call this its anniversary?
Oh, I like that because anniversaries help mark occasions, and this is a wonderful time to mark the founding of a journal that has brought us so much pediatric content. Most of it is incredible, some of it has become dated, but with all of it, we've learned and grown as a profession.
Usually when we talk about the journal, we will host one of its esteemed editors, Dr. Lewis First, Dr. Alex Kemper, or Dr. Rachel Moon. But if we're throwing an anniversary celebration, it feels like we should invite them all to come on.
Well, no problem. I have them on speed dial. Lewis, Alex, and Rachel, are you all free to chat about the journal today?
What else would we want to be doing to celebrate the 75th year
Yay.
of our publication? An hour means all of us in the Academy.
And I think that we've all been just sitting here waiting for you to call, David.
Aw, that's sweet.
I have to say, I love a good Diamond Jubilee.
Well, welcome everybody. 75 years of a thriving and influential journal. But let's start with a little bit about the past. This is a question for each one of you, but let's start with Rachel. Can you let us know what article or types of articles you think the journal has published that have led to key improvements in children's health?
Joanna, that is a great question. And we just happen to have an entire website celebrating the 75th anniversary that has retrospectives that the different AAP committees, councils, and sections wrote about the most significant articles in the past 75 years. So, for instance, I'm on the task force for SIDS, and we highlighted articles that have really driven the changes in what we recommend to parents about where and how their baby should sleep. And subsequently, the numbers of babies who have died suddenly and unexpectedly have dropped. So I think that that is really important. And that's just one example, but I think other people may have others.
Well, let's find out. Alex, what about you?
You know, I loved looking at those retrospectives. I learned so much from them. One of the earlier ones that I read was the one from the section on nicotine and tobacco prevention and treatment. And I'd like to say there's some really important snuff in here. Thank you.
Ow.
All right.
Ow.
But seriously.
That was a little too on the
comment
nose.
just vaporized.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. I was just trying to light up the room. But sorry. So, but what was interesting, so the section on nicotine and tobacco prevention treatment was founded in 2012, but clearly, both the AAP and Pediatrics, the journal, have been involved in issues of tobacco prevention really for quite a long time. So, you know, putting a historical perspective on this, in 1964 is when the Surgeon General's warning about the risk of lung cancer came out. And it was just a few years later, in 1967, when there was a study that was published that looked at predictors of youth tobacco use and heavy smoking and challenges related to quitting. There was another paper from 1976 about passive cigarette smoke exposure and the risk of SIDS. And more recently, there have been a lot of papers published in the journal about e-cigarettes. As a matter of fact, the first paper on e-cigarettes came out in 2012. And I thought it was pretty interesting that it was a survey of Polish students, of teens, and nearly all of them had heard about e-cigarettes. and half of them thought that they were safer than regular combustible cigarettes. And, clearly the use of e-cigarettes has gone around the world, and it's been a major focus of the journal, something that I'm really proud to have published about.
And Louis, anything you want to mention?
Well, I want to just frame this comment about retrospective. When you have a 75th anniversary, we can celebrate, but we wanted to give back at the journal. And so what we're alluding to, and I hope your listeners know, is that we invited the sections, councils, and committees of the Academy to share with us a paper from each of the 25 years, the 3/4 of a century. Pick one paper and share with us how it was game-changing for your specialty or for our field. And we got, I believe, 60 plus of these, and they are on our website, and they are available to the public. And it is a historical array of incredible advances and as I'm going to talk about, a little bit of a retreat in terms of some of the things that the sections focused on. For me, I really want to just call out the section on minority health, equity, and inclusion put forward an essay written by Dr. Nathan Chomelo, who's on the executive board of that section. And he put out an article called The History of Race-Based Medicine in the Pages of Pediatrics, a review of the last 75 years. And I think when you look at your 75 years, as much as it's a celebration, it's also, and we'll talk about this, I think, as we get to the present and the future, look at the transparency that we've tried to provide about where we went right and where we as a specialty went in a different direction. And when it comes to issues of race, we, for the first multiple decades, had articles in the journal that really had race from a biologic standpoint and not as a social construct. And Dr. Chomelo points out how putting these articles in really were setbacks or were promotions for systemic or structural racism. The good news is that in 2019, we started to recognize the Academy started to recognize it was time to realize the error of seeing race for its biologic manifestations, which it does not have, and instead to come out first with a policy statement, the impact of racism on child and adolescent health, that the section on adolescent and the Council on Community Pediatrics put out in 2019. And that was followed by the board of the Academy in 2022 coming out with their policy statement, eliminating race-based medicine. And from that moment on, we really have now made it very clear that the Academy and the journal views race as a social construct. And we've taken steps over the past couple of years to ensure that in the journal, our author guidelines, our reviewer guidelines, the language we used is now all there to really put guardrails up and make sure that this is what we want our journal to reflect and not move the journal in a direction that promotes structural or systemic racism. As you noticed, and Alex, you can comment, even policy statements, have been retracted because they had race from a biologic standpoint when it didn't need to be there. Alex, the hyperbilirubinemia guidelines that you put forward and steered certainly got in front of this. And you may want to comment about the actions that were taken there as an example of how we're seeing now race as a social construct and not a biologic one.
Well, of course, Louis, I'm more than happy to talk about the bilirubin guidelines. And what I'd like to highlight is as we worked on those guidelines, we really did work to remove race as it had appeared in previous versions of the guideline. Things about risk of hyperbilirubinemia for infants who are Black or infants who are Asian. That was really significantly revised. And I would just again point anyone who's interested to look at the guidelines, and also a really wonderful commentary that was led by Joe Wright and Maria Trent.
I should add that we also started a section in the journal that's associate editor Dr. Kimberly Montez from Wake Forest is the editor of that section to really put essays in similar to Dr. Chomelo's that really highlight this. But I need to say that's not the only place in the journal where we are conscious about race and ethnicity as a social construct. It runs throughout the journal, but we also created a section so that truly the journal in 1948 was designed to meet the social, the emotional, the medical, and the psychological needs of children. And we need to do that for all children. And I believe as we round the bend here in our 75th year, we are now positioned to make sure that is the case going forward.
This has been such a critical pivot in our attention. And I want to get back to celebrating everything that we've done. But before we do, are there any other articles or publications that you look back on and think maybe that wasn't as helpful as the authors had hoped at the time?
As part of the 75th celebration, we published an article written by Dr. Andrea Cruz and Jeff Baker, both who have been involved with the journal for a long time, where they went back over 75 years. They read a lot of articles to look for opportunities where maybe we didn't get things right. And they identified 8. I won't, for the purposes of our conversation today, go through them all, but I'll just highlight some that I thought were particularly instructive. So there was a paper in the 1950s entitled The Problem of Mental Deficiency in Children that took a negative lens on children with special healthcare needs and focused on the role of institutionalization. The paper certainly was a violation of what we would all now consider a tenet of respect for persons. But I think it's also instructive to think about how the journal has changed since then and the work that's been done to be more inclusive. Similarly, there was a paper in the early 1960s on effeminacy of prepubertal boys, where they talk about sissy boys and overprotective mothers and emotionally distant fathers. But clearly, the Academy has gone a long way in terms of its gender affirming care, its promotion of gender affirming care. And I guess one more that I'd like to highlight was from 1980. So really, in the grand scheme of things, not too long ago, that described a support group for medical house staff wives. So, clearly pediatrics has changed with many more women than men going into medicine, but the focus solely on medical house staff wives, that's obviously disturbing. And there was nothing in there about supporting the house staff themselves. And it was interesting. This one quote I'd like to read from the study is that many of the women expressed concern that their husbands put up with the unfair demands of their programs, yet feared if they got too angry with their spouses, they would find a comforting nurse. So clearly, that's not the way we like to think about things now. Exactly.
But I have a house husband.
Is this a Mad Men script?
It's exactly what it sounds like, but 1980, right? So again, in the grand scheme of things, not too long ago. But I do think that the additional focus on how to address wellness and prevent burnout that I certainly see here in our residency program, and I know happens throughout the country, I think is something that we should be proud of. And again, fortunately, things have changed since this article.
And I think what's really special is that all of these articles that we've been discussed are free and are available. We're not hiding them. The things that we didn't do right, that's one we put out to everybody in the spirit of what we want our journal to be, which is to show pediatrics as it changes, just like we improve our practices each day. So I hope listeners do go and look at those 8 articles. Nobody intended to have us talking, years later about where we went wrong. And I'm sure there are things going on today that when all of us are gathered at our 150th, and I look forward to seeing you all there, we'll look back on this one and talk about things that were going on now that we probably got wrong. But again, with the intent to make children well. And I think that's the important takeaway.
And I think the other important thing is that at the time, nobody thought that this was wrong. But
right.
Our knowledge has evolved. And just like our knowledge evolves and the evidence evolves, practice evolves as well. And I think that that's an important takeaway as well.
And this kind of transparency and this kind of discussion, I think, is so important for advancing the field.
It is so important to reflect on the past, but we also want to talk about today. And we've been chatting a lot about the content of the journal. But Louis, can you let us know a little bit about how you pick that content and what it's like being on the board?
Well, I would even want to take it back a step because we were just talking about where the journal is as we move to 2024, 2023, going to 2024. First thing, I'm very proud of the fact that more than 60% of our board are now women. And in terms of at least 40% of our board self-identify as underrepresented in one way or another. This is also, I'm not going to say revolutionary, but evolutionary as we continue to make the journal reflect who is in our field and who are the children that we have to care for. So step one is that the people, as we look in the present, really becomes our board that's reflective of who's there. The second thing is on our board are not just pediatricians, but we have public members, we have other healthcare professionals, we have psychologists, nurses, advanced practice providers, and that also begins to share the idea of shared decision making around what happens when we decide on an article. The second thing I just want to comment on the process, when over the years, I can remember when I started, an article that was accepted literally would be appearing a year plus later, not by intent, but just because things were backed up and there was not a lot of technology involved in the journal. We were on, as Alex would say, we weren't quite on papyrus parchment. But now when we get an article that we think is of relevance to get out there, we can get it out within 5 working days once we've accepted it. And that also is the present, not, as we go to the future, who knows? But we have really streamlined our process to get information out, and that is reflected in the numbers of articles that we are reviewing, which gets to the third part and your question, Joanna, which is really the fact that we have a very different kind of process in terms of how we make decisions. And I think your listeners would probably find it interesting to know that they can become a part of that and see us do this. But every weekend, we will take 40, 50 articles that have been reviewed, and we come together, not just Alex and myself or Rachel, Alex, we bring in other members of our editorial board and then people who are interested to be part of the discussion to do crowdsourcing to help make our decisions. So we open the doors. All you need to do is email us at pediatricseditorial@aap.org. Tell us you'd like to join the call. We'll be back in touch with you with what you need to do to join us on a weekend, and we'd love to have you and have you participate in how we make the decisions. This is something I've done since I took over in 2009 and find it refreshing, because none of us have the ability. We are just like everyone else. We are pediatricians who care a great deal about children, but in order to have the expertise needed, we need lots of other people to help us. It's also peer review for us to make sure we don't get complacent, jaded, we've seen this, etc. So the whole process, the timeliness and the composition of in the present, what's making our journal what it is I think the transparency is critical, the relevancy is critical, and the input is critical. I don't know whether Alex or Rachel want to add to that.
I don't know of any other journal that has this degree of transparency. And I think that I should say, I know that it's made the journal better. I've learned so much from the people that join to participate in the call. It's helped strengthen the articles that we end up accepting. It makes the journal stronger. And in the spirit of looking back to some of those other articles that reflected their time but haven't stood the test of time, I think that this degree of transparency is one step to helping avoid that.
And then I think that the representation is really key. So when we sit around at our board meetings, it's not just a lot of senior people. We have trainees that are involved. We have a lot of younger physicians. And what they bring to the table is very different and a very different perspective than some of us who've been in practice for longer. And I think that that's really important as well, because sometimes they'll bring up things that none of us have ever thought of, but we listen to them and often make decisions and create new products because of those discussions. So I think that it's a very representative and a very transparent way of doing things, which I think is great.
Well, Rachel, while we're talking about all the exciting new things that the journal is doing, you're the digital editor for the journal, and your job is really important, as a lot of pediatricians are using digital resources to access journal articles and videos. How do you keep pediatricians engaged online? Is there anything new in terms of digital engagement that we should be looking out for?
Well, we have been working very hard on digital outreach, and there are a couple of reasons that we do this. One is that we want to get all of the evidence-based information out to more of our target population, which could be broadly defined as anybody who takes care of children. So we're using social media. We're on Facebook and we're on Instagram, and then we use blogs to publicize our content in plain language, because not everybody who takes care of children is fluent in medicalese. So we have these blogs. blogs. And actually, many of these blogs are written by trainees, which is really pretty fun because they also bring a very different perspective to that. And then for the medical folks, we also have periodic image quizzes where we show an x-ray or a photo, and then people can guess what it is. And then those all tie in with current or recent articles. So we're trying a lot of different things, and we're using digital outreach in a bunch of different ways to try to get the information out to more of our target population. Because we know that not everybody is sitting there reading the journal cover to cover or going to the website.
You're kidding. Wait a minute. Stop the podcast. People are not reading our journal cover to cover?
No, Louis, you didn't know this?
No, I think I have to go through Dr. Kubler-Ross's 5 phases here. Anger, denial.
You're already in denial.
Absolutely. I'm in that phase. But all right, well, keep going. I guess there is a reason to have
digital,
a different way to get the information.
Outreach.
Yes, to have digital.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so we're really trying to be thoughtful about where people are getting their information and how we can be there as well.
And I like that we're starting to look to the future of what's in store for the journal and its readers. And there have always been interesting sections and special editions like this one of the journal. Can we expect more of that in the future, Alex?
Yes, you can. And
All right.
he's so fun.
Just the way you said
Well, it was such a spontaneous way that question was asked and the way you responded.
Yes. All right.
Absolutely.
Bring it back up. We really want the journal to help pediatricians be able to improve the care that they provide. So we're always looking at opportunities for new sections to provide new material that could help our readers, most of whom are busy clinicians. So since I've been involved with the journal, we've developed a section called Quality Reports that allows people to share their quality improvement work, to be able to spread what's been successful in improving care. We have a new section called Family Partnerships, and these are articles that demonstrate how clinicians and families or patients can work together to solve important problems. And that section is actually overseen by a member of our editorial board who is a family representative. And so we, again, really want to use these articles to help bring people together to advance strategies for improving child health care. We have a section that's relatively new called Advocacy Case Studies that shows how pediatricians can engage in meaningful advocacy efforts. We have a section now called Diagnostic Dilemmas and Clinical Reasoning that presents an interesting case with a big reveal at the end. Those are especially fun for using with trainees. We have ethics rounds where individuals who have real life ethical dilemmas related to child health care can work with us to get different voices to weigh in about how they would solve the ethical problem. And those article types also end with the big reveal in terms of how things were solved. We have special feature articles from our section on pediatric trainees, and they have the section as a special process of reviewing those articles and working with trainees who might want to appear in the journal. So we really do have a lot of sections out there to try to cover the full range of things that pediatricians need to address. One of the newest things that we have is a special type of state-of-the-art article that will present interesting new developments in basic and early translational science and apply that at the bedside as they take care of patients. So these articles will not dumb down, but explain the fundamental elements of these new basic science discoveries in ways that busy clinicians can understand and point the way towards how these might be used in their daily practice. So I'm really excited about that new section.
You know, I'm kind of amazed at all of this innovation. It's hard to imagine much more happening, but let's try. Louis, Rachel, what do you see as some future changes that you'd like to bring to the journal?
Well, I'm going to just start by noting the fact that what Alex just put forward were suggestions that came from our readers. were suggestions that come to us, and keeping an ear to the ground where we need to respond and move this journal where children are. I almost say when we talk about the implicit and explicit biases, if you're still thinking pediatrics has some kind of look that you thought was there 10, 20 years ago, please look again. I mean, these things that Alex just breezed through, having a column where families are co-authors with pediatricians and then being able to put that information out and make those articles free to everyone. So families can bring the article to you as a pediatrician, if you're listening, and say, I saw this and I understand what it says. That to me is really, really important, so that what happens in that journal is not a best kept secret, but is now empowering our families and our readers together to take that new knowledge and go with it. So that being said, I am really interested as we look to the future in a couple of things. First of all, I am interested in making sure that the feedback gets even more direct to us. So this year on our website, we will have almost an instant feedback button where if you want to evaluate the journal and give us feedback as we go, we can continue from an ongoing quality improvement process to give you the evidence-based information you need to provide even better care to children. We're starting to look at the issue. There's so much advocacy going on. We have an advocacy case report section, but there's also lots of policies. We're in legislatures now. We're in city councils. We're trying to get things done for children. How does that happen to make policy? Not just AAP policies. We publish those. But the grassroots work, we've had suggestions that maybe we should explore articles that talk about how do you shape a policy in one town that could be generalizable to other towns and other cities. And so keep an eye out as we start to explore that. And the third thing I would say is I'm very interested in sustainability as we look to the journal. And one way to have sustainability is to say, are the future child health care professionals or families or anyone interested in children, do they know how important it is to review an article? And can they do it? When you think about training, we are not training the next generation of pediatricians necessarily to learn how to review. And we're not talking about necessarily someone who's published 35 articles and has 45 grants. They're important and they have to advance the field. And we love our scientists. But the idea of looking at something and saying, does this make sense to me, is who we have to think about. So we're creating pathways, and we're actually doing a pilot right now, taking trainees, residents, and teaching them how to review articles so that they are basically licensed to go on and teach others how to do this. So we build a pathway program for the future. So we will have the same kind of critiquing that's going to bring you the best science when you take a look at the papers that we're thinking about publishing. And that's not the only thing that we're looking at in terms of sustainability. I'll let Rachel talk a little bit about how we're turning that over into the digital age and blogs, et cetera.
Yeah, so I'm going to piggyback on a couple of things that Louis said. So he talked about the family partnerships and how those are articles that are written by family members and pediatricians or other clinicians. But we also have a blog that is for families, and it's called Family Partnerships with Pediatrics. And the whole idea behind that is that it breaks down the article into pretty digestible pieces. And then it has a very practical part at the very end. What can you do with this article? You can take this article and show it to your pediatrician if you have concerns about an asthma action plan or something like that. And really, really practical ways of bringing this material to families. And then in terms of pathway programs, we are really looking for other ways to get trainees involved early with the journal. And this includes if they want to write blogs, or if they want to learn how to translate the information into more lay content. And we're looking at other ways of using digital outreach and looking at our digital strategy right now. And we're thinking more broadly about how we can get more of our content out there, not to just pediatricians and trainees, but I really do think that we have to try to combat all of the misinformation out there. Parents have told us that they love it when there's evidence-based information out there that they can access. And we need to try to be more out there so that people can access it and they can understand what the research says.
I just want to do a shout out as well to Ms. Kara Coleman, who is a public member, a member of our executive board, and came up with the idea of taking our family partnerships, which is the section she heralds, and moving it into these blogs that can get out there. And now is bringing in other public members to write blogs and starting to train them as well. This whole thing about families being able to use the journal as much as pediatricians can, again, is not about taking the science and making it elementary, but really, Rachel, the work you're doing in digitalizing this content and reshaping it for different types of readers really broadens the reach of what we can do with pediatrics.
Yeah, one point that I want to make is I hope everyone recognizes that putting together the journal is a hands-on process, and it's the communication that we have on the editorial board with our reviewers and with our authors that really helps shape it in a way that's meaningful for readers. And the reason I bring this up is I get a lot of emails about AI, right? And what can we do with AI? Well, we have been very clear that we do not want reviewers using AI to write their reviews. That really undermines this hands-on human approach that we've really taken to the journal. And so we're very clear about that. And the other thing is
you actually breezed by that, Alex. I mean, it's one thing when we've had authors, we've gotten questions all the time. Can AI be an author on this paper?
Yeah, I was about to say that.
They wrote the message. But the second piece is when reviewers are saying, I really want to have my weekend off, so I had AI do the review. Let's just say we played that game Whack-A-Mole, where both of those things cannot happen. And it's very clear in our author guidelines. There are certain times when you can talk about when AI can be acknowledged, but it's not going to be an author and it's not going to be a reviewer in pediatrics.
Certainly people are beginning to use AI to help shape their work. And if they do that in their manuscripts, we want them to be very clear about it. We don't have time today to go through all the mistakes, all the errors that have come out with AI. And certainly for now, we do not want to have AI writing manuscripts, and AI cannot be an author of the work that we publish. I'm very interested in the role that AI can play in pediatrics in terms of helping diagnose or provide treatment recommendations, those kinds of things. But when it comes to writing manuscripts or reviewing manuscripts, it's a human process right now.
One place where artificial intelligence has been found to be of value is if a language other than English is the language used by an author, then as long as you are using that manuscript, AI can actually reshape the text into journal English much more easily than you might expect. So I'm not here to condemn all artificial intelligence, but that's one where we have a purpose for it. We have the manuscript, we're helping the author, and it can be reshaped if the author wishes to go there and then acknowledge that they used it.
And it still needs extensive review after that process to make sure that the meaning hasn't changed.
Right.
And if I know anything about the journal Pediatrics, I know you guys will evolve how you use AI in the future as well. And you guys were kind of hitting on this, Alex, you were saying you get a lot of emails, and Lewis was talking about online engagement. But say we have listeners or readers right now who really have ideas for the evolution of the journal. What is the absolute best way to reach you guys to share those ideas?
There are a number of different ways. If they have a response to an article, they can post a comment. If it's about the journal and the mechanics of the journal, Pediatrics editorial at AAP.org is a great feedback mechanism, but we're going to be placing a box on our website in the year ahead where they can just hit the box and put the comment in or take a little survey and give us the feedback of what they would like to see our journal evolving to. Our editorial process, we have 40 plus people and they're wonderful on our editorial board. We meet monthly and we meet for big meetings twice a year where we go through those ideas. We came out of the NCE meeting where we had our most recent editorial board meeting with multiple bullet points of things that we want to think about implementing in the next 12 months. And we look forward to sharing those with listeners on the podcast when we're ready to introduce them.
And there's a call at least once a year for new editorial board members. So if you're interested in doing that, pay attention to our website, or if you want to be on a list to get an email when that comes out, you could just email that Pediatrics editorial at aap.org as well.
There's one other way as well that I'm very proud of is that we're very conscious about giving many people the opportunity to be in our journal. So when we need a commentary or an editorial, we usually turn to people we don't know. we'll literally, if you have an interest and you're a part of a section, we will cold call you. We'll send you a note and say, would you like to write a commentary? What we don't want to do is have our friends where everybody says it's the same people in that journal who seem to be in the journal club. This is not a club. This is about the child and children, communities, and all children. So it is really important that we, again, and the demographics of who we pick, again, has to reflect who's in our field. So we love it when we pick people who are surprised to get invited to write a commentary. We help them through the process, and it becomes suddenly they realize this is their journal, our journal, and not just a small group of people who say they'll take care of it. We all have to take care of what's in that journal and then bring it forward to take care of the kids that we care so much about.
And then I just want to put in a plug for a couple of the sections that trainees write a lot for. So like our DDCR, our diagnostic dilemmas and clinical reasoning, and some of our newer things like the advocacy case reports, the ethics rounds, things like that. We have a lot of trainees who write articles like that. And I do want to say that we go out of our way to make sure that the trainees get the support and the feedback that they should get. So if you are a trainee and you are writing an article for the first time, put that in your cover letter. Say, I am a trainee, and we will make sure that you get good feedback on that, whether you want it or not.
I think it's great that we do that.
No, I do too.
I've known that since I was a trainee, and when I tell people that, they're surprised. And I'm like, no, if you say you're a trainee, they're gonna really give you commentary on your article, and it's gonna be great, and it is.
Yeah, I mean, we want you to pull the curtain. I hope people see when we're here each month, we are like everybody. We have a good time, but we want people to feel like they can access us, and this is our journal. I know I've said that, but even trainees, we read those cover letters. We are a journal with heart, and we also have pulmonary and GI and other. But we do have heart, and so if you tell us why this paper means so much to you, then it may not be it's going to appear there, but we're going to give you the feedback you need. Same thing goes internationally as well. We really try to reach out when people send us manuscripts from around the world, that even if it's not going to appear in the journal, we want people to have some feedback, and we try to do that as much as we possibly can.
And can I give a shout out to the staff that work for Pediatrics? We do not have a big staff at all. We have like 3 or 4 core people who do everything, and they deserve so much recognition and praise and thank yous. Which is actually,
if we're starting to wrap up, I think nothing says 75th anniversary like a knock-knock joke.
We could not go on without one, Louis. Please.
May I? Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Thank you. Okay, that was your line, Joanna. Who's there? This is a knock-knock joke, okay? Who's there? Okay, I'm going to follow it now. Wanda.
Wanda who?
Wanda, thank everyone who over the years has helped to make Pediatrics the journal that it has been, is, and will be it the authors, the reviewers, the staff, and of course, everyone who are your listeners and our readers. Because as good as the first 75 years have been, we look forward to the next 75 being even better.
Well, team, speaking for myself and Joanna, we are so proud and thrilled that we have been able to do our little part in expanding the reach of this incredible journal. And happy Diamond Jubilee.
So, Alex, are you getting diamonds for everybody?
I thought Mark Del Monte was getting us.
Somebody call him.
I hope he's listening.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I've got the cubic zirconium with the AAP logo. I can share that with you if you'd like. That's about as close as we're going to get. The diamond is every issue of the journal is a diamond, and not in the rough, but in the real. So,
and I want to know, can we come back next year and celebrate the 76th?
Yeah, sure. Why? Make it an annual thing. All right. The last time we had champagne on the podcast was for our 100th episode, but I think this deserves a toast. Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, David. Thank you to all the listeners of Pediatrics on Call. Here's to you, and here's to our journal, and here's to children and their future. Happy 75th.
Alex, Rachel, and Louis, thank you so much for joining us to celebrate. If you want more pediatrics, visit our website at aap.org/podcast.
That's it for today's episode. If you like Pediatrics on Call, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app and help us spread the word. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Pediatrics on Call.
Pediatrics on Call is a production of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Our producer and editor is Ann Johnsos. Our audio engineer is Doug Nagel. Joe Puskars is our associate producer, and Susan Martin is our executive producer. Our theme music was composed by Matthew Simonson. We're taking a little break for the holidays and so I can have a baby. But we'll be back in January with Pathways to Pediatrics featuring our new AAP president.
We'll talk to Dr. Ben Hoffman about how he got where he is and what he hopes to do with the Academy. I'm Dr. David Hill.
And I'm Dr. Joanna Parga-Belinkie. Thanks for listening.